Alright, so like I promised in the other part of this video, that's the first part of this video, that we're going to solve a lot of examples in the next video, which is this one. So remember, we are talking about factorization. We learned factorization of perfect square quadratics. We learned difference of squares, sum of cubes, difference of cubes, and all that. So let's go through some examples now. We ask to factorize the following expressions. The first one, now remember that if you have, this is a quadratic expression. Now there are many things you must know. Number one is that this is a quadratic because the highest power of the unknown variable is 2. Again, you see how many terms are in this quadratic expression. We have one term here, two terms, three terms. So anytime you have three terms, it's called trinomial. Right? If you have two terms, it's called a binomial. So it is also safe to say that this is a trinomial. Now I want to confirm if it's a perfect square trinomial, and then we can easily factorize. Now remember, if it's a perfect square, number one, the first term will be a square, the last term will be a square. So let's rewrite this. This will be x squared minus 12x plus 6 squared, because the 6 is the same thing as 6 squared. Now remember, we're saying that this is a perfect square trinomial if the middle term is 2 times the first term, which is x, times the last term, which is 6. So 2 times x is 2x, 2x times 6 is 12x. So this is indeed a perfect square. So we can easily simplify. So we're going to say, okay, since it's a perfect square, we're going to take the first term. This is a negative sign, so we're going to take the negative sign, the first term minus the last term, all squared, and then we've easily factorized. So just for the proofs, let's expand this. So this is x minus 6, x minus 6. X times x is x squared. X times minus 6 is minus 6x. Minus 6 times x is another minus 6x. And then minus 6 times minus 6 is what? Positive 36. Now we have x squared. Minus 6x minus 6x is minus 12x plus 36. And it checks out with the original question. So we factorize that. Now the second question, remember in this video we're focusing on perfect square trinomials. Now we also have other methods of factorizing a quadratic expression that is not a perfect square, which we're going to see also. And then you must also know that not all quadratic expressions are easily factorizable. So you can use, sometimes you complete the square and then we complete the square, or we use the quadratic formula, but I'm not going to focus on all that for this video. I'm going to make another video where I'll explain everything about quadratic equations. Now let's check whether this is a perfect square. 16 we can write as a perfect square because that's 4 squared, and 25 we can write as 5 squared. So let's write that. This is 4 squared x squared plus 40x plus 5 squared. Let's just join this one together. So we have 4x all squared plus 40x plus 5 squared. So we're saying that this is a perfect square quadratic if the middle term is 2 times the first term. The first term there is 4x times the last term, which is 5. 2 times 4 is 8, right? 8x. 8x times 5 is 40, yeah. 40x. So this is a perfect square quadratic again. So we can easily factorize by taking the first term. This is positive, so we're going to take positive this time. The first term plus the last term, all squared, and then that is the answer. So let's go further. Now see the next question. Let's check whether this is a perfect square trinomial. So you see that the first term is a perfect square, but the last term is not, because no number multiplying itself will give 6. So this is not a perfect square trinomial, so we cannot factorize it the same way we have been doing others. However, there are also another way of factorizing this. That way is, consider the last term here. First of all, we're going to use the coefficient of s squared to multiply this last term. But you see that the coefficient of s squared here is 1. So 1 times negative 6 is still negative 6. So we're dealing with negative 6. So you're going to ask yourself, what are the two factors of negative 6? Let's just list out the factors. So I just like to list out the factors first. So we have 1 times 6. I'll just ignore the signs for now. We have 2 times 3. And then we have 3 times 2, but it's the same thing as 2 times 3. So these are all the factors of negative 6. So you're going to say, what are the two factors that such that when I add it, I should get negative 5, the middle term, when I multiply, I should get negative 6. Now let's try minus 2, and let's say now okay, let me just say this way. There are many things to consider if you're doing this. Now you're going to consider the last term here, which is negative 6, right? Now for me to have a negative, remember I said that the two factors I'm going to consider, they must multiply to give me negative 6. Now for me to have negative, it's only when minus multiplies with plus that you get what? Negative. Yeah, so you should put that into consideration, that it is only when minus and plus multiply that I have negative. So that's one thing to check. So I know that my two factors, one must be negative and one must be positive. Now the second thing to consider is the middle term. So you see that the sign of the middle term there is negative. So if two numbers are going to add up to give you negative 5, then the bigger number must be the negative one, right? That's the So we're going to try 2 and 3. Now we have 2, plus 3. Now we need to remember that for us to have a negative at 6, one must be negative and one must be positive. The small one have to be positive, that's plus 2, and then this will be minus 3. You can put it in a bracket. So you see that this plus minus will be minus. So we have 2 minus 3, which is equal to minus 1. That's not giving us negative 5. So 2 and 3, definitely not the factors we're looking for. Now we're only left with two other options, which is 1 and 6. So plus 1, plus minus 6, right? Plus minus is minus. So we have 1 minus 6, which is equal to minus 5. It checks out. And also plus 1 times minus 6 is equal to, plus minus is minus 6. So it also checks out for this one. And then that is going to be our factors. So remember, the factors are so we can just rewrite this expression and say this is s squared. Instead of writing 5x, now we're going to write minus 1x and, or rather, plus x and minus 6x, right? The two factors that gave us that minus 5x. So we have minus 6x plus x minus 6. Now whether you write plus x first or you write minus 6x first, you're still going to get the same thing, right? Just no matter how you do it. So remember, we recall, or if you notice that we've not changed anything in this expression, because minus 6x plus x is the same thing as minus 5x, which is the same with the original question. So the purpose of doing this is just so we can have 4 terms and then we can factorize by grouping. Again, if you don't understand what I mean by factorization by grouping, I've already done a video on that, so I'm going to put the link in the description below. Watch that, right? So let's factorize by grouping. We're going to have s squared minus 6x, one bracket, positive, and then I have x minus 6 in one bracket. So in this first bracket, see the common term there is x. So I'm going to factorize it, and we're going to have x minus 6. In the other bracket, nothing is common, so we just use 1 and just factorize. So we're going to also have x minus 6. Then our final answer would be, collect one of the terms in the bracket, which is x minus 6, rather factor x minus 6 out, and then have x plus 1. Again, I've already done a video on this type of factorization, so if you're not familiar with this, just watch the video in the description and then you should be good to go. So you see, that's the way we factorized this trinomial, even though it's not a perfect square trinomial, but it's still factorizable, just so you know. Now let's go to the next.